wondered when the president gives a speech, he's got the teleprompters on each side, and his head goes, what happens if he gets stuck and there's someone over here he wants to talk to, do the words keep going? I found out the answer today. The words do keep going. He can stay on one side, but watch it. It's perfect. It's perfect time from one side to the other. But his speech is probably better than mine because I don't have a teleprompter. But one of the things that people say, what's unusual, what's interesting that's been going on? Well, I did move in with my dad in Washington. And anybody who's ever had a teenage son or daughter that they were counting the days until they moved out can imagine how it was when I called my dad at age 47 and said, Dad, do you think I could live with you for a while? And on the other end of the phone I heard, sure, son, sure, I'd love to have you. But there was a few missed beats there. Cartoonists thought it was pretty funny, so they did a cartoon, couple of frames of us in the kitchen talking about things, and one of the questions was me holding a grocery list and saying, Dad, I'm going to the grocery store. Is there anything you'd like for me to put on the list? And my dad's response was, we don't believe in central planning around here. The other frame in the cartoon was me asking Dad, now it's time for me to pay the rent. Can I write you a check? And his response was, only gold and silver, son. I had some unusual things happen to me along the way, campaigning, but probably the most unusual was one day in Litchfield as we were going through on our bus tour, a woman came up to me, grabbed me by the hair and said, oh, just wanted to know if it was a toupee. I said, lady, just give me a break, I'm just having a bad hair day. The other day I was in Paducah and there was a buffet line. The guy going through the buffet line's got 2 big plates of food. He's filling up a third one. The guy next to him says, you're not going to live very long eating like that. The guy looked back at him and said, well, my granddad lived to be 103. The guy looked back at him and said, bet you did live to 100 eating like that. The guy looked back at him and said, no, he lived to 100 by minding his own business. Calvin Coolidge is one of my favorite presidents. When he was asked what his administration would be remembered for, the first thing that came to mind was, minding my own business. Unfortunately, that's not really the plan now. They always want to know, what is your plan for government? How will government get involved in this or that? It's never minding your own business that they're looking for. They think government is always the answer to our ails, or government is always the answer to the problem. I always harken back to what Reagan said. You know, Reagan said, government's not the solution to the problem, government is the problem. We need to remember that because it is the beauty of the marketplace that works, but there is often the government that gets in between you and the marketplace or in between you and the consumer. We do have, I think, at this point, a nation really of busybodies. The other day I had one of the energy bureaucrats come before the Energy Committee and I asked her if she was pro-choice. And she just sat there and she finally answered something. I said, you know, the point is you're not pro-choice. You may be with regard to one aspect, but you're not pro-choice when it comes to light bulbs or toilets or washing machines or what kind of car I can drive. Every one of these things, the government is telling me what I can buy, what can be sold, what you can manufacture, how it should be manufactured. The list of regulations for all of our businesses goes on and on. Regulations are said to cost more than $1.5 trillion to the economy. In fact, we have a bill that's called the Regulatory Freedom Act. And we've been asking everybody that comes to Washington, try not to come with your hand out for something. Try to come and tell me or ask me, what is the way that you can get government out of my business so I can make more of a profit and hire more people? So we're going to actually introduce a Regulatory Freedom Act, which doesn't cost the Treasury anything, but could give billions of dollars back to the economy and creation of jobs. Well, you ask yourself about the government being busybodies. I've learned a couple things since I'm up there. Number one, the EPA takes care of oil spills. That doesn't sound bad. I mean, obviously we don't want oil spills in the Gulf, and there's got to be some rules. I'm not talking about the Gulf. I'm talking about at dairies. Apparently, the same oil spill rule that applies to oil spills in the Gulf also is now being applied to dairies because milk has oil in it. It's not petroleum oil, but it's oil nonetheless, and so they're using the same rules. So if you have oil, if you have milk spill at your dairy, you're supposed to have a hazmat team first responders, and make sure you call the EPA. This is how crazy government has gotten. There's also something called the fugitive dust rule. I thought just the name was a joke. I thought this can't be real. It was originally intended for dust when they crush coal, and there's probably has to be some rules about dust escaping. But you know who they're applying it to now? Farms. They said the farmers are creating too much dust. We need to cut their dust by 50%. One, how are you going to measure it? And two, how are they going to bring the crops in when it hasn't rained in a month? And we have a water truck going down the dirt road, spraying the dirt road as they go. I mean, this is the absurdity of where we've gotten to with government. Ronald Reagan liked to talk about it. Ronald Reagan would talk about OSHA. OSHA, everybody's best friend. Well, OSHA has manuals to teach you how to be safe and take care of yourself. One manual is about how to climb a ladder. There's 144 rules. You know what the first rule in the OSHA manual on climbing ladders is? Make sure that you face the ladder before you begin climbing. OSHA has a farm manual too. It's about 31 pages. And in the OSHA's farm manual it says that when you're walking around on your farm, be very, very careful. Make sure you're watching where you step, because you could step in a gushy substance that comes from cows and you could slip and fall. Government's taking care of us. I have a friend in northern Kentucky who's a German immigrant who's done pretty well for himself. He was out on his land and he had a bulldozer, and he was riding the bulldozer himself, and he was moving some dirt around his cow pond because he didn't like the way the dirt was eroding into his cattle pond. Well, one of his busybody neighbors turned him into the EPA. So the state EPA came out there with a phalanx of 10 attorneys and told him they were going to fine him $25,000 a day if he didn't make the cattle pond back the way it used to be. Forget about trying to figure out how you figure out what the cattle pond used to be. But anyway, they told him they were going to fine him $25,000 a day. So he got the bill. He called up Senator McConnell's office and got the bill, and he read it. Something most of the legislators don't take time to do. And the EPA obviously hadn't been doing. He read the bill, and in the bill it says that farms are exempt. So he dared them. He had them all come out on the land, and he didn't have an attorney, and then he pulled the bill out, and he read the phrase in it that says farms are exempt. He says, now you get the hell off my land. We need some more of that sometimes. The government has become a government of busybodies that intrudes in every step. I have my own medical practice. Every day I discovered a new tax or a new regulation. The people who think that we are under-taxed, I think, are mistaken. The other thing you have to ask yourself, if you think the answer to our budgetary problems is raising taxes, the first question you should ask is, are they spending my money wisely? Are they doing a good job accounting for where my money is going? In the budget, there's $100 billion unaccounted for. It's either been improperly spent, or they don't know where it's been spent. I'll give you an example. We have pretty significant budgets, and when I thought it would be a good example to show that I'm fiscally conservative in the money that I control, the money that I could do something to save for the taxpayer. So I want to turn a couple $100,000 back in every year to the Treasury. Problem is we can't figure out if it actually goes back to the Treasury, and other congressmen and senators have asked the same thing. We're not sure if it goes to a leadership fund or it's spent. There are various opinions, but we can't even be positive that the money would actually go back to offset the deficit. We are going to find that out, but it's taken me several months and I still don't have a clear-cut answer. You ask, well, is there any waste or problems up there? The Pentagon. The Pentagon cannot balance its books. Hasn't for years. And you say, well, why not? Well, they have an answer. They say they're too big to be audited. When your government tells you that they are too big to be audited, that means we have a government that's grown too large. You remember the business community, the big bankers saying they were too big to fail. They weren't too big to receive the profit in good times, but they were too big to absorb the loss in bad times, and so we were asked to absorb the losses. Now, it turns out that a lot of these losses, when we audited the Fed, we did a partial audit of the Fed, a lot of these losses that we paid to AIG, the taxpayer gave to AIG really still has no money and no assets, but the money gets passed through to foreign banks. Turns out that one of the foreign banks that we've been giving money to, the Libyan National Bank. So now we're in the midst of a war to topple a country that we've been giving money to. We give them foreign aid, and not that much, but we give them some foreign aid, and now it turns out that we've been bailing out their bank with taxpayer funds. Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Now I think, and I'm a minority, but there are some other Republicans who believe this, I think when you go to war, you should go to war with congressional authority. I think it's a big mistake, and it's a very bad precedent to allow war to be fought with no vote in Congress. Now, it also shows you the hypocrisy of the way politics goes. Many on the left criticized Bush, to no end about the Iraq War. In fact, I wasn't in favor of going to Iraq. But at the very least, Bush came to Congress and he voted before going to Afghanistan, and Congress voted before going to Iraq. You had some representation and you had some chance to have your representative vote one way or another. But now we're involved in a third war in which no vote happened. So we took the president's own words. The president said as a candidate in 2007 that we should never give the president the unilateral power to go to war without congressional authority unless we're in danger of imminent attack. I took his words and put it into a resolution on the floor. It didn't make the Democrats very happy, but we had them vote on it, and they simply voted no because they were embarrassed by it. But it points out the hypocrisy of the way the town goes.